Hello, thank you for having me. Where do I start? All right, here's my talk. I'll be talking about voting with your feet, because that's the theme of this conference. But I always want to start in Lesotho. This is a country I've spent a few years back. I've spent quite a lot of time here. I got involved in a company there. I think you're saying the word stupid. I would not have dared to say that. I became a board member. I became the president of this company in Lesotho. I think most of people in here will not know where this country is, so you can look at it on the map and you find it in the middle of South Africa. And I realized that the governance of this company was very much not up to Western standards. So I tried to change it. I tried to change it from the inside, using my voice. The dichotomy about this conference is about voting with your feet, but it's about this dichotomy between voice and exit, right? And when we say voice, we mean trying to change things from the inside. I tried, it was quite hard, and it was a conundrum. What do? Do I stay and keep trying to change it, or do I exit and move my feet, which sometimes is more effective, and that's what all these projects is about. So what was I doing in Lesotho? Well, you guessed it, cannabis, of course. Here are pictures of some of my colleagues. It actually is the best country in the world to grow cannabis, no kidding. Governance there, not always the best, but really, by the nature, it's the best country. So, this is not what you know me for. If you know me as a special economic zone scholar. And it is something I've studied for a long time. It is the ultimate voting with your feet policy, right? It's about providing a space where more companies want to go, lower the cost, lower taxes. But it's also, as I've found through my studies, a very old model. It's your old industrial parks, right? It's the kind of things that we're trying to disrupt. Special economic zones are valuable to study. I realized I wanted to study the kind of things that we're all pursuing today when I did my PhD dissertation. And I realized that we want to understand special economic zones first, because that was so much laid at the foundation of a lot of things that we're trying to understand. It is, and I wouldn't discourage that, I wouldn't say that special economic zones doesn't have a value. Often it creates a lot of opportunities for people. As we know, it is a place where you get more economic activity, more people come there. You create a lot of opportunities for people. Here are some scenes from a place called Kodivi in Haiti that I studied some. And yes, I think all of the pictures on this presentation are my own, except for a couple of AI-generated ones. But this is the kind of work environment, right? You create employment for people in a country where very few people have these opportunities, right? You still have the women laundering their clothes outside of the zone in the river, but you'll have things like healthcare provision, and this guy who seems like he needs it, waiting for the psychologist. And so it is an old model. It still creates a lot of opportunities, but we know that we want to see a new version of this, right? Why isn't it changing, though? Because people like me, we can study it, and we can make the argument that it should be better. We can do it so much better. You policymakers, you can sit down with them, and you can talk about how they can make it better. The problem is that the political economy of special economic zones teaches you that there is often no incentive to change the model, because the reason why they're there in the first place is often not to really create more freedom. It is to pursue certain political goals. Like, I am the president, and I want to say that we grew this part of the country more, and things like that. They are incentivized to control the projects. They want to make sure that they always work. So what you see in many countries with special economic zones is that governments, especially when a zone is not working, so to speak, and is not creating prosperity in the sense that they have to raise more and more taxes to put it into the zone, that's when they're more incentivized to keep doing that more and more and make it grow. So that's a problem. It's a problem of governance, and that's what the political economy of this, how that works. If you try to change the model and you're saying, well, you should give people more freedom, it's a threat to their power, and that's what we have. So another area, you could say that, well, this is about government, and how about if you're in the private sector? And I learned that often you see the same problem in other areas as well as in the private sectors. So I am right now in wealth management, starting a firm there. I'm coming from the institutional world, and I learned that this is a really bad industry. That's kind of the word I would want to use. Fees are high. Wealth managers, right? Yeah, they take your money, they charge you 1.5% a year on your wealth, and they're usually not that good. If I have the conversations with them, they're usually not that smart. And it's also an industry that's dominated with the big players. And if you've ever been in a big organization, a big company, you learn that they become kind of bureaucracy in their own right. You think there'll be competition from the outside. But there is this kind of political economy of wealth management too, just like there is in everything else. So you have these really big, your JP Morgans and stuff like that of the world, that they will have big wealth management operations. They'll be hiring hundreds of people to do wealth management, meaning advising people, private people, with their money. And because they are so big, if they would try to disrupt and they come up with a different model, and I will not have time to cover what my model would be, but there are better ways of doing this. And if they would come up with a different model and you would put it over here, that would threaten this whole part over here of their business and the revenue from that. So they are not incentivized to do that. Meaning, to get the change in an industry like this, you have to change it from the outside. And this is actually an exciting time to be in wealth management because there's a big wealth transfer happening between an old generation and a new generation. Over 100 trillion, say that word, $1 trillion are going to change hands just in the United States from the baby boomers to kind of the old millennials around that age. And the new generation, they don't really want to just go golfing and being wined and dined and then give up a big chunk of their wealth. They actually want to see something else. And it's also very interesting where people put their money. Some people might be interested in seeing this circle. It's a bit out of line, but it says crypto and digital assets in the red one there. This was a survey from Bank of America asking people, where do you see the opportunities? Where do you want to put your money, right? Real estate is always like on the top for anyone, it seems. But crypto, digital assets, goes from the bottom to the top here. Meaning, as the young people who now are interested in it and right now have $10,000 maybe invested in this space, as they grow up and as they inherit the money, you're going to see a flood of money into things like this. So that makes it an exciting time, right? So what are the lessons here for the Free Cities movement? I think that change can happen. Often we see change happening pretty gradually, and then it can happen suddenly. And it comes from wherever you are, whether you are in industry, in business, or in government and doing special economic zones. I think that change happens from the outside when you actually threaten an old model, when you create an alternative that people can see, and that where the established players see that they're actually threatened. Because what you see in the financial world, where I've been for some time now, I've been trying to change things from the outside of financial companies, and it's often very hard. They are set in their ways. They don't want to deal with things. They want to monitor. They monitor and monitor, and monitoring means we're going to change when we are threatened because others do. And as long as we have an agreement, it's kind of this tacit collusion of let's not change too much, everybody's sitting pretty comfortably in a lot of industries that are quite established. So I think that as we're creating new jurisdictions here, we are creating those alternatives. And there are two things that are happening, right? One is there a different alternative? And two is, are there people who are kind of migrating, just like we see the money migrating now in the wealth management space? And the more and more people waking up to, there are opportunities for different kind of governance, I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I think that the old special economic zone model, we know why the governments are doing it. It's still going to exist. There's going to be a lot of those out there, but I think a lot of governments are actually feeling like they want to attract people and they need that. They're going to see that there is an option out there that actually threatens this kind of old model that I've been sticking to for so long. So I think I'm hopeful in that way about this movement, where we're going. Do we need this kind of wealth management kind of opportunity in terms of like a new generation that all of a sudden has migration options? I think it's a lot about education, people realizing that you can actually move and you can cross borders. So what happened with Lesotho then, you might wonder? I did give up my voice and I exited. Begrudgingly, afterwards, the company has made the changes that they should have made a few years ago. This picture, by the way, is from the Special Economic Zones map that is up there online that maps out special economic zones in the world. Kind of fun to just peruse, at least if you're interested in those things. It's fun to peruse. As you see, there is a special economic zone in Lesotho. It's not active. It hasn't been any projects there. There has been an attempt to create another zone, which was around where the cannabis operation that I was involved with, where it's operating, and it was the husband of the CEO of the company who was was a driver between the special economic zone project there. And I know that zone was up on this map for a while, and I mentioned it to them that it's really not active yet. So unfortunately, he lived in Johannesburg. Johannesburg is a dangerous place. I was working with them I was advising on the Lesotho government just on a voluntary basis as they were setting this up. But the driving really force behind it, he was mugged one day, they took some of his money and they left him dead on the side of the road. So he was a wonderful human being and that was very sad. After that, nothing has moved ahead in these projects. But that's Lesotho for you. So conclusion, and by the way, this is the local mall of Mafeking. What is it called? The Limpano Mall or something like that. It's a very nice place. Lesotho, by the way, if you compare it to South Africa, if you see a shed like this, nobody lives there. It's only kiosks. In South Africa, you have slums. You don't have that in this country. So just like firms sometimes need to see the people, to see that there can be a force to change, I think that we're going to see changes in the old style of SEZs. I think it's going to happen when there is a threat from the outside. And I think that there is still a lot of energy in creating change through voice and helping governments to do it differently. And I know that if I talk to a government and they'll say, that was great, thank you so much, I know that when I turn around, they're probably going to do what they're going to do anyway, because they're not pursuing the goal that I am pursuing. They don't have the motivation that I have with seeing more freedom for their people. Unfortunately, that's still the case. But again, we can have a new generation. And I see two forces behind this. One is a new generation, of course, of young people wanting to find new jurisdictions, seeing that there's an opportunity for a different and freer life. Last night, we had a Tipolis shareholder meeting, and somebody mentioned at that meeting something that stuck with me, was that there's also a new generation in many countries of policymakers. So if you have also younger policymakers, they can be more radical and they might also pursue different goals and actually have a different sense of what they're trying to do with their country and being these upstart nations. And that's really promising as well. So with that, I thank you. And I might leave some room for questions here. So thank you. And this is a picture of my book you can find on Amazon. It's on special economic zones, the political economy, special economic zones as well. Okay.
Oh, why am I holding my...
Anyone have any questions they want to ask?
There's one arm in the back there. All I see is an arm, of course.
Hello, thank you. What do you do for protecting this area from governance, spontaneous violence? Because normally the government is not the best in protecting freedom or even sovereignty of individuals. So in every region of the world we see some grow, like in special economic zones, and then they flatten out and they die, normally. Or how can we protect these zones better in the future? That's my question.
When it comes to special economic zones, that is actually quite rare, and it's something that I expected to see more of. Cuba had a zone for a good while that was like a special economic zone, and that was one where you actually saw wealth being transferred by a very short-termistic government from the companies that were invested there, and they confiscated the assets that have grown up there. So if you go to some countries like that, that are the things that can happen. Most countries, as I mentioned, and this is also the curse of the special economic zones, right, is that governments pursue it because they have a goal of showing that this area grew thanks to me putting in Like, I was the one creating it. I created this wealth. And sometimes it's just capital, by the way, moving from one part of the country to another. And they say, look, it's richer here than in the zone than the rest of the country, and therefore I created this, right? So we actually don't see that, and I think that's the reason. I think the reason we don't see a lot of confiscation of property and things like that in special economic zones is that because the government set them up so that they are not threatened too much by people having too much freedom. So unfortunately, that's the case, right? And then if we're now creating the newer jurisdictions, you'll have a lot of experts in the room, right, of the kind of security measures that they set up. But often we are in this world where the government has the last say of whether you can be there, and that's why we're seeing all these like agreements with governments that generally have to be signed for a zone to keep existing, even if it has more autonomy.
Thanks, Lotta, for your presentation. I am looking forward to hear about your project with wealth management, and I agree with you. Yeah, it's very limited because, of course, they need to agree each other to get that. But then in your model, what will be the proposal? And I know one of the answers will be Bitcoin, to move wealth from one country to the other, especially now that Europe is heavily taxed, and if you want to take your money out, the capital gains tax and stamp duties and everything is being hit so hard. That would be a good solution. I would like to know your thoughts about that. Thanks.
Sure. And it is hard in the sense of you don't just take everybody's money and say, hey, let's just put everything in the Cook Islands and then take it from there. Because those transfers are very expensive. I do a lot of international investing on a macro basis. So what I see a lot is that people are very home biased. So an American will they say, oh, I'm diversified because I have a large cap index, and then I have an S&P index, and then I have the MSCI US index. Guess what? They're all the same. It's 100% the same companies, right? Or not 100%, but almost. And then they think they're diversified. And by the way, they feel very good with their advisor because the advisor picked out 3 great indices that are all diversified. And they made no sense, right? Like, he did nothing for you. So one thing, I would say the first thing to answer your question, the main thing would be just to think of the world as what is the actual wealth that is being created in the world, and proxy that as well as you can for how you place your money. Meaning, US on a capital market basis is more than 50% of the world. But that means that 50% of your wealth should not be in the US. And there are ways to get to that international exposure without paying a lot, right? Through your own bank, you'll have various indices. You can do like an international index, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to go travel all around the world and find the various companies and work with your lawyers, which is going to cost you, a lot every time. Not going to cost you. It can't cost you much more than what you could possibly earn from this kind of revenue. So that's definitely where I would start to think about the international diversification. If you do it on a macro level, it doesn't have to be so costly either. All right. Thank you.